believe me, in the clubhouse, we had a feeling in the clubhouse that we owe these fans. They've been loyal for 75 years plus, and so we all felt more for the fans than we did for ourselves, I think. But it was a sweet victory to finally get it and to bring get the World Series ring, which I still have. And look, I keep it in my lockbox, so I haven't had it on for a while, but I know right where it is. And a big thrill for the team, but I think a bigger thrill for the fans.
Oh, God Almighty.
Well, did you hear that? Did you hear that?
Yeah, you said it was a big thrill for the fans.
Yeah, right. Well, we felt it for the fans. They waited a long time to get one, and we came close a few times, but finally, 55 was the magic year, and you can thank Johnny Padres, who won 2 games in that World Series. He won the 7th one 2-0 in Yankee Stadium. That was a big thrill for all of us.
Awesome memories for you, I'm sure.
That. I got home from school.
Could you tell us
Well,
about? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There was a moment that is on my mind forever when Johnny Padres got the last out. Elston Howard grounded out to Pee Wee at shortstop. That was the final out in the 7th game. And we went up the runway into the clubhouse. And believe me, this is not exaggerated. We're going up that runway into the visitors clubhouse. We knew we were world champions. We knew we were going to get the ring. But more than that, we knew the Dodger fans would finally get to say, we're no bum any longer. We're world champions. And I think we felt that for our fans as much as we did for ourselves.
That's great. Could you tell us before we go, into people asking questions? First of all, how does it feel to have a street named after you in Brooklyn? We know you live in Indiana, but how does that make you feel?
That is beyond my wildest to think that the good fans of Brooklyn would do that. And in fact, I thought it was a coincidence until saying that they had checked it with the New York newspapers to see if, in fact, that was named after the former pitcher, and found out that truly it was. Several of the guys on the safety board, I think it was, in Brooklyn, decided to do that. And I was overwhelmed to think that this skinny kid from Anderson, Indiana, would have his name on a Brooklyn exit. That's too much.
I pass that on the Bell Parkway frequently, and having you here tonight just makes it that much more special. And finally,
the only thing they might have done to give it a nice little touch was my name pronounced in Brooklynese was not Carl Erskine. It was Carl Oyskin. Right. And they could have spelled that out on the exit sign.
And we know you went to Los Angeles for 1 year, but can you talk about the New York Giant Brooklyn Dodger rivalry?
In New York at that time, with we were 3 teams in the major league, 3 teams. Of course, the Yankees were in the American League, but the Giants were in our league, the National League. And we played every team in the National League. That was 8-team league. So the 7 other teams, we played 11 times at home and 11 times on the road, 22 times in one season in the same city. That made that rivalry so tense that it didn't matter what the standings was at the time. It didn't make any difference who was in first place or second or fifth or wherever. The Giant series was always, your manhood was on the line. It was really an intense rivalry. Now, my roommate was Duke Snyder, and Duke Duke capped it off by saying, when we looked at those colors across this diamond in the other dugout, orange and black, it made us not even like Halloween.
All right, why don't we open it up? If you have a question, there is a feature down on the bottom to raise your hand. Steve Rothschild, you're up.
Oh, you and I have spoken on the phone a few times in the last few weeks with my buddy from Indiana. Question I have for you, and I think I heard you on the radio a number of years ago saying that you were the first one to see Roy Campanella in the hospital. You were the only one he wanted to see. Can you tell us a little bit about that initial visit to Roy after his accident?
I could tell you this. It was May, early in the season. We were playing in Philadelphia, and it rained us out, a night game. So I checked out, and it was a two-hour train ride back to New York. So I went all by myself. I took the train back to New York. I got a cab, took me to the hospital, Bellevue, I think it was, maybe. Anyway, I went to see Campy. Now, none of us had seen Roy since the accident. When I checked in the hospital, they said he's not having any visitors. I said, they said his family's in the room right now. And I said, would you just tell him that one of his teammates is here? So they said, oh, yes, let him come on up. So the family left the room, and I went up and walked into Campy's room. Now, remember, I'd pitched Roy 10 seasons, over 1,000 innings I'd pitched to Roy. And we had always thought alike because we knew the league, we knew the hitters, and when he'd give signs, that was normally the exact pitch I wanted to throw. So I walked in the room. Roy is in a special bed. He's face down and a cutout around his face and head. So, but he was looking straight down. So he couldn't see me. But when he heard my voice, it got quiet in that room. And I think he had the emotions as I did, that I was seeing Campy for the first time, and he was seeing me as seeing the team. And it was an emotional 5 minutes. I bet it seemed like 5 minutes before either one of us spoke. And then Campy was always upbeat. He started talking about, how you doing, Carl? How's Betty? How's Jimmy? How's your family? He turned the whole conversation away from himself. And that's the way he handled that. And then Roy was a thankful person. He was a man of faith as well. And he believed in prayer. And he said, you know, Carl, I know a lot of people have been praying for me. And that's really what's gotten me through some of these early days, understanding that he had a tracheometry to save his life. And so that was an emotional visit with Roy. I figured I'd pitched probably 1,000 innings at least to Roy. And,
thank you, Carl. Thank you.
We were just very close.
Very nice. We got a Dodger fan, Joe Margolis. You are up. John McLaughlin on deck.
Thank you, Gary.
You're welcome.
Carl, you may recall that you and I spoke about a month ago on the telephone.
All right. Yes. Thank you. Yeah.
It's anticipated that the Hall of Fame is going to be, the ERA committee is going to be voting on Gil Hodges for the final time for admission to the Hall of Fame this year. And you are probably the most knowledgeable person in the entire world regarding information about Gil Hodges, as they are about to take that vote this year. If you could speak to that committee, what would you tell them?
I would tell them this, that if they look at the stats of the 1950s, Gil Hodges was the classy first baseman that led all first basemen in the 1950s. secondly, when our shortstop and captain Pee Wee Reese was inducted into the Hall of Fame, there was always a little tagline that said, and he played alongside Jackie Robinson. Well, Gil played on the other side of Jackie, and I can tell you, he was a peacemaker on the infield. A lot of plays at second had a lot of collisions. Fights could have erupted easily, but Gil Hodges kept the peace on the infield, and that helped Jackie a lot in his first couple of years in the majors.
Thank you. As a fellow, now Gil Hodges was, even though he lived much of his life in Brooklyn, he was a fellow Indianan like yourself.
Correct. Yeah, we always identified that. And other than the national anthem, the most played song in Ebbets Field in the 1940s and 50s was Back Home in Indiana, because every time Gil hit a home run while he was circling the bases, Gladys Gooding, our organist, played Back Home in Indiana. Every time I came in to pitch, Gladys Gooding played Back Home in Indiana. So that was a real identity for me to be my home state to be recognized in Ebbets Field every time I came in the ball game.
That's terrific.
John
Thanks,
McLaughlin,
Carl.
you're up.
Great. Thanks, Carl, for speaking to us tonight. It's great to hear from you. And also, my two-part question: what was it like to play those games in Jersey City when the Dodgers were over there for a few games? And also, did the players think the team would ever leave Brooklyn?
Well, I don't think the team itself never did, and we weren't privy to all the infighting that was going on with city officials to keep Mr. O'Malley truly was a New Yorker. He never dreamed of ever taking the team away from New York, but he tried and tried to get a piece of property. Using his own money, he's going to rebuild the ballpark in Brooklyn. And ironically, 60 plus years later, where that facility is now located, where the Nets play, is exactly where O'Malley wanted to take his own money and build a stadium in Brooklyn. But the city fathers blocked him. But ironically now, that's the location of, I don't know the name of that arena there. It's where the Brooklyn Nets play.
Barclays Center.
That's it. Well, that's the very site that Mr. O'Malley wanted to move and pay with his own money, build a new ballpark. So you could imagine if that hadn't been blocked, there might still be a Brooklyn Dodgers.
Thank you, Carl.
Bill Clink, you're up.
Let me unmute. Thank you very much, Carl. A two-part question. Carl, first off, from Mike Brombach, who is my neighbor and a fellow Masonic Order, a guy with you there in Indiana. I think you know him. He put together a call between you and me last year.
Yes, I remember.
Carl, Mike's a wonderful man, and he sends his best wishes on to you. He'll be back there in the summertime, probably bump into you. One of the things that I find in talking to some ball players, one of them a living giant by the name of Eddie Brassu, who you pitched to, I wanted to ask you about something Ed said. He said, by far, you had the best changeup of any pitcher he ever faced. And when he threw that, man, it was lights out. Can you discuss, first off, your changeup, how you developed it, and did you really think it was your best pitch?
Well, I threw three pitches. My fastball was probably, we didn't have the gun in those days, but a good major league fastball was usually in the 91 to 93 range. Mm-hmm. So I was somewhere in that range. And then I threw straight overhand, so my curveball broke straight down. And then I developed this off-speed pitch, which the Dodgers taught. And it was a four-seam pitch, just like my four-seam fastball. But you let the ball drop back in your hand just a little bit. And when you threw it with a full motion, and raised the fingers as you delivered it, it took something off the pitch, and it was a beautiful third pitch for my fastball, curveball, and off speed. So yes, I can tell you that the pitching coaches of today are teaching all their staff an off-speed pitch. In my era, it was somewhat rare for a pitcher that could throw a good fastball to also take something off the pitch.
Mm-hmm.
And today, that's a deadly pitch. It's one of the most difficult pitches to learn. But if you can learn one and throw it with full arm motion, but take something off of it, it's a devastating pitch to the hitter. Hitter's always ready for the fastball. And when you can throw a pitch that looks like the fastball, but instead of 93 miles an hour, it's more like 89 miles an hour. It's just enough to cause a hitter to commit before the ball's there, and he either pops it up or misses it completely. So there's more pitchers throwing off-speed pitches today than ever before.
Thank you, Bill. Jim Folkerts, you're up, Jim.
Gary,
Jim Falk.
thanks.
Go ahead, Jim.
So Carl, thank you for spending the time tonight. This is a real treat for me, especially. But I wanted to ask your thoughts on the move from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. Given the the rabid fan base that I loved reading about from Brooklyn, what was the transition like with the fans in Los Angeles? And what do you think the impact was on yourself and the team?
Well, the team was not well advised about the move. It was only rumors or what we read in the newspaper. The front office or Mr. O'Malley never came to the clubhouse and shared with us what was going on with the potential move to LA. But when it did happen, it was a shock for us to not be playing in New York City, which is the biggest stage in the world, and be moving completely across the country to Los Angeles. And to add to the unfamiliar part of the move, there was no stadium in Los Angeles. And so we played the first 3 years, I believe it was 3 years, in the Coliseum, which is a football field. And that was added to the anxiety of leaving Ebbets Field, which was a historic place to play, and a crowd of, I think it held 35,000. The Coliseum held over 100,000, but it was a football stadium, and it was it was almost like the Polo Grounds. It was real short down each left field, right field line, about 300 feet, and very deep in center field. And so I think it was 3 years we played there before Dodger Stadium was built. But it was a culture shock for sure to leave New York City, leave Brooklyn, and go to Hollywood. That was a big culture shock.
All right, Ed Garlick, I'm sorry, Ed, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, I did Dodger Fantasy Camp 5 times, and my first time was 1999. And I met Carl. He was on a bike. And of course, I recognized him, and we started to talk. And Carl told me a story. I'd love if he could repeat it. The year after he won 20 games, I think that was in '52, he did not sign his contract, and he came to Vero because they only offered him a small raise. And Buzzy Bavasi, and I think it was Hank Greenberg, were having a talk when they saw Carl. Carl, can you tell that story?
Yeah, that happened. It happened in the winter meetings, actually, in Atlanta. And I walked across I was a player rep in those years, and so I was there for the meetings with the owners. And as I walked across the lobby of the hotel, Greenberg and Buzzy were sitting there, and I didn't know that what he had said to Buzzy, but he said to him, "Erskine had a great year last year. I'll bet you won't give him what he asked for." I didn't hear that, but but Buzzy got up, walked to me over by the elevator, and he said, Carl, you had a nice year. Well, I did. I won 20 and lost 6 and led the league. And he said, what are you thinking about? Well, I was actually making $18,000. And so I decided I'd like to go to 30 because no Dodger pitcher had ever made 30,000. Preacher Rowe had made 28.5. But so I was making 18. I won a $12,000 raise after leading the league. So Buzzy said, I can't go that high, Carl. I don't have a budget for that. And I said, well, let's talk later. No, wait. Look, I'll give you 28.5 and I'll pay your family's expenses in spring training. And that'll make your 30 right there. And I'll just throw your expenses in with the Dodger expenses. You wouldn't even have to pay any taxes on it. So I said, well, that's not quite, you're still a little short. And so I said, how about paying for the dental work I'm having done up in my hometown of Anderson, Indiana? So I talked Buzzy in another $600 to pay for 6 gold inlays that I was have my dentist put in my mouth. And so some years passed and I had to have one of those teeth pulled. So I saved the nugget and I made a tie tack out of it. So I could wear a tie and I could tell anybody want to see what's left of my 54 raise. Here it is right here on my tie.
Well, I just want to say Carl told me that story. And at that point, he just opened his mouth and put a finger in his mouth and said, that was part of my contract.
Yeah, you can see what's left of my 54 raise. I still got 3 or 4 of those gold inlays left. So
we're gonna move on to a couple more questions. Carl, just a quick one. 1951, you're in the bullpen. Branca comes out. What do you think would have happened if you had gone in to face Thompson?
Well, that's a good question, and I bounced a curveball and warming up, and when the coach told Dress and the manager that Erskine was bouncing his curve, he said, "Let me have Branca." The Polo Grounds had a very long distance from home plate to the backstop, and Rube Walker was catching. Campy was hurt that day. So when they said I was bouncing my curveball, he said, "Let me have Branca." They didn't want any wild pitches with that distance behind home plate, and Rube was pretty slow on his feet. So that curveball I bounced, people often say, "Carl, what was your best pitch in baseball?" And I said, well, looking back, I think it was a curveball I bounced in the bullpen. And they said, "Let me have Branca." That might have been my best pitch.
All right, we're going to go to Mars, Andy, George, and then Seth. Mars, you're up.
Thank you. Carl, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Question I have is,
Can't call him. Skip him.
Mars, we're going to have to go. You're going to have to come back to you. Andy, you're up. Andy, take off your mute. Andy, you got to demute yourself.
Maybe up, so you need to unmute me.
Go ahead, Andy.
Okay. First of all, thanks, Gary. An honor to speak to you, Carl. Back to 1952, you pitched a no-hitter against the Cubs. There's a great story about Willie Ramsdell at the end of the game. Would you tell us?
Willie Ramsdell was a pitcher, and he's the only batter that got on base. I walked him on 4 pitches because it was going to rain. We could tell it was going to rain heavy, and we were trying to get 5 innings in. So in the 3rd inning, pitching to Ramsdell, who was a terrible hitter, I walked him on 4 straight pitches, trying to hurry. So after the rain did come, the game went on 40-minute rain delay. Came back and finished the game. It was a no-hitter. Well, Happy Felton had a show called Talk to the Stars, and they pick a player from the opponents and pick a player from the Dodgers for that game. Well, really, Ramsdell was the only batter that day that got on base. And so, as terrible a hitter as he was, he ended up being star of the game. So you got $50 for being on the show. So Willie Ramsdale was one of the worst hitters in the league, but he ended up getting the $50 and being star of the game. So if I'd have got Ramsdale out, it'd have been a perfect game. But I walked the most imperfect hitter. That's me, the only base runner in a
Made him $50, baby.
He made the $50. Yes, he did.
Sorry.
Thank you, Andy. George, you're up.
Yeah,
Mark,
how
we'll
you
go back
doing?
to you after.
Okay, I was very fortunate. I was at your no-hitter on May 12th, 1956, and I sat, I think we had Elsie the cow things from the ice cream, and they gave us free tickets, and I sat in the upper deck behind first base, and you provided me with probably the only no-hitter I ever saw. It was a Seaver's imperfect game, but your no-hitter was the first and only no-hitter I ever saw, and I've been going to many, many baseball games through my life.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Well, you have to have a team that can play defense so you pitch a no-hitter. Because there's always going to be one or two plays that could have been base hits that some good fielder made a good play. In that game, in the 56 no-hitter against the Giants, Jackie Robinson made a fantastic play off the ball hit by Willie Mays. It was going to be a sure base hit. Jackie's playing third base, and the ball was to his left. And Jackie was so quick. He got to that ball, fielded on one hop, turned it into an easy out, and it saved my no-hitter. So
what inning was that?
It was about the 5th or 6th inning. It was Willie Mays hit third in the lineup, and this was his second time at bat. So it was, I would say, at least the 3rd or 4th inning. It was his second time at bat.
What was so wonderful about going to those ball games is I was about 12 years old, 11 years old. We were able to go on the subways ourselves. We were able to go walk around. Nobody stopped us. You can't do that in today's world. It's just so different. And that's really what stands out between now and then, the difference in the climate of the world.
First interview done. Now I'm on a different.
Carl, how we doing? All right, everything good?
Hey, doing good, thanks. Yeah.
Good. All right. Seth Jonas and then Mars. Hopefully you're fixed and we'll go back to you. Seth, you're up.
All right, thanks, Gary. My question here is a little more personal. My grandfather was a sports writer with the Journal, and I'd love to know if you can talk about the relationship that the players had with the sports writers, which obviously is much different than it currently is. So I'd love to know a little bit about your memories of that. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Well, there was the writers are called the beat writers, B-E-A-T, beat writers. They travel with us, and all those writers, they didn't make much money, and they traveled with us. So we got very closely acquainted with the writers.
In the window
and,
now. But
the writer, I remember several of the writers. Roscoe McGowan for the New York Times was one. Dick Young wrote for the Daily News, and Dick was a caustic kind of writer, but he'd tell it like it was. It didn't make any difference if it was good or bad. But the writers traveled with us, and they all became really good friends with me. I appreciated the writers, even though they wrote things sometimes I wish I hadn't read. But
that may be it. Yeah.
That was a treat to. I think New York had about 7 papers in those days.
Yeah.
And they had different editions of the papers besides. So the writers were real important, and I always appreciated the writers and the job they had to do, and they didn't make much money either. So we were all in the same boat.
All right, we got a Mars. Hopefully this will work now. Go.
All right, Carl, I'd like to know, was there any talk on on walking? Bobby Thompson said he did well against Ralph Branca to pitch to Willie Mays. That's the first part. The second part is the book, The Power Broker. Robert Moses offered O'Malley Flushing Meadows, and O'Malley said, who would want to come to the swamps?
Yeah. Well, they of course, Mr. O'Malley did try numerous ways to stay in New York because he was a New Yorker, but they tempted him so much when the New York hierarchy was giving him difficulty relocating, and they finally gave him the charmed offer to come to the West Coast. But Mr. O'Malley was a New Yorker, and although he takes a lot of blame, one of the stories that gets around was that if you were in a room with Mussolini and Hitler and O'Malley, and you had 2 bullets in the gun, who would you shoot? And he said O'Malley twice.
And Willie Mays, why not Bobby Thompson, who already did well against Branca, for Willie Mays?
I didn't get that one. I'm sorry.
Gary, repeat it.
He wants to know, should Thompson then walk so that Mays, the rookie, would be up?
No, that wouldn't have been a logical strategy at all. Who would want to walk to a hitter to get to Willie Mays in the first place? But no, because he was a rookie, it didn't mean anything to how he could play baseball. I'm telling you. If people often ask me who was the best player I saw beside your own teammates, and I always mention Willie Mays because he could beat you with his leg, his arms, his bat. He was a complete player. He was everything that you had to do with baseball. He could do it better than anybody.
And the Giants were also stealing the signs. Don't forget that. And Branca hit a high fastball.
Yeah, that's true. Well, sign stealing was always a part of the game. If you were careless as a catcher, first base coach could steal the signs. It's always been, but there was never any rule against how you stole the signs. So actually, they didn't break any rules. It was unethical, certainly, to use telescopes and a buzzer system was certainly unethical, but there actually was no rule. And I don't think there's a rule today even. I'm not sure, but I don't think there's a rule that says you can steal signs only this way and eliminating using a telescope or whatever. But sign stealing was always, and we always were suspicious that the Giants were had some way of stealing signs. There was enough, but we never asked an umpire to check the bull. If they'd checked the bullpen, they would have found a wire running from
the clubhouse,
the center field clubhouse, to the bullpen in right center field.
Correct.
And if you're at the plate in the Polo Grounds, you could look right over the pitcher's left shoulder, and you saw right straight into the Giants bullpen, which was in right center field. And so you didn't even have to turn your head. So when they had the towel on the guy's lap in the bullpen, if the towel was quiet, it was a fastball. If he picked up the towel, wiped his hands or something, he moved it, it was a breaking pitch. So that's how they relayed the signs from the center field window in the clubhouse with a telescope. And Herman Franks was a former catcher, so he's the one that manned the telescope. And being a former catcher, he's familiar with the signs, the different ways they use signs from the catcher's hand. So that's how they staffed the telescope with Herman Franks. So when Herman Franks passed away several years ago, I sent my buddy Ralph Branca an email, and I said, Ralph, old Giants never die. They just steal away.
Chris Haft, you're up, Chris. Go for it. Chris
Hey,
Haft.
Yes.
Go ahead, Chris.
Hi, how are you? Mr. Erskine, at the start of this call, you mentioned the closeness between, you referenced the closeness between your ball club and your fans, how badly you want to win titles for the fans. I've been fortunate enough to cover Major League Baseball for most of the past 30 years. I can tell you that closeness just does not exist anymore. What do you think the players are missing by not having that kind of relationship with the fans as you guys did?
Well, we did have a close relationship. Evans Field, Wrigley Field today is as close as I can think of a ballpark to Evans Field. Evans Field had very little foul territory. When I was on the mound, I could hear the fans talking to me behind third base or behind first base. It was a very close confines, very little foul territory. So, but when people ask me what was your favorite ballpark, I say Evans Field because I had some of my best games at Evans Field. And so even though it was a small ballpark, I pitched well there. And so that is still in my mind my favorite ballpark.
Dan Taylor, you're up.
Thanks very much for doing this, Carl. I'm curious about train travel, what the experience was like as a ball club traveling by train, and how that lent itself to team camaraderie and morale.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'll tell you what, I was a young player when I went to the big leagues. I was 21 years old. Riding those classy trains in those days was a real adventure. Having dinner in a diner on a train, white tablecloth, heavy silverware, and condiments on the table. We had a private dining car, a private club car, and if it was an overnight trip, we had our sleeping car. That was first class travel in those days. Air travel had not really taken off yet in the early 40s or in the 40s. So it was for a kid like me to make the big leagues when I was 20 years old, and to ride those beautiful trains. That was a great adventure for me. The Dodgers were the first team to fly, so I helped break in the first air travel in Major League Baseball. We had a DC-3, and it wasn't for long trips, but it was a little scary for us to learn to fly instead of the trains we'd been used to. So all the guys didn't like to fly. Ferrello refused to fly. Preacher Rowe didn't fly, and Newcomb didn't like to fly. But eventually, they all had to come over to the air travel.
Let's go to Renee. You're up, Renee. Take off your mute. There you go.
How you doing? I'm curious. Could you do you have any stories of the intensity of the fans when the Giants and Dodgers played? I mean, if anything funny, crazy that the fans were yelling, fighting, anything that sticks out in your mind?
Well, I can tell you. I'll tell you this: in the National League, there were 8 teams. Same thing in the American League, but we played every team 22 times, 11 at home, 11 on the road. But with the Giants, all those 22 games were all in New York City because we go to Polo Grounds and play on the road, and then they come to Evans Field for their road game. There was an intensity about those Giant games. It was like didn't make any difference what the standings.
Welcome. You've got mail.
But the intensity was your manhood was on the line when you're playing the Giants. The rivalry was terrific. Now remember this: there were 3 major league teams in New York at the same time. That's the only city I think ever was that had 3 major league teams at the same time. But the Giants were in the same league with us, so we played them 22 times, 11 away and 11 at home, and the intensity was really high. It was like your manhood was on the line, as I mentioned. And, Magley was really tough on us. I think Magley beat us 11 straight times. Fortunately, I finally beat Magley one night in Brooklyn for the first time he lost at Evans Field. So he was finally traded to Cleveland, and then from Cleveland, the Dodgers got him back. So it was an interesting thing to see Magley walk in the Dodger clubhouse and put on a Dodger uniform.
Pitch the
But
no-hitter.
he was a real pro, and I liked him. He would really take charge pitcher.
Lee Lowenfish, you're up.
There, Carl, it's great to hear you again. You helped me when I was doing my Branch Rickey book, telling me about the Continental League. He wanted you to coach or play in the Continental League. And you told me that you were about ready to retire. Did you have any other encounters with him after that?
With Mr. Rickey?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was good friends with Mr. Rickey. He actually signed me when I originally signed into pro baseball, and I got to know Mr. Rickey quite well. Other than my father, I would say he's a one man in my life that had the most influence. But yeah, he saw me on the Fifth Avenue. I was working for a company in New York after my playing days, and I was walking down Fifth Avenue. He pulled up in a cab and he yelled at me. He said, "Get in, come get in the cab." And so I got in and said hello to Mr. Rickey, and he said, "I'd like to have you work for me. I'm forming the Continental League, a third major league." Okay. And so that was the first time I'd heard about that, but that never came to fruition because what it did, it forced the owners to expand, and that cut off the idea of forming a third league. So that was an invitation I never accepted, but I was flattered that Mr. Rickey wanted me to work for him.
Can you also tell the story you told in Indianapolis about after your no-hitter, Jackie Robinson had a clipping in the paper that said he was finished, and he went up to the writer who wrote that and said, "Oh, am I finished, huh?"
Well, here's quickly the real story. In the clubhouse before that Saturday game on May the 12th, 1956, a new paper was laying open on a trunk, equipment trunk, and the headline says, "The Dodgers are over the hill." The sub-headline says, "Erskine can't win with what he's been throwing up there, and Robinson can't win. He's too slow. His days are numbered, and Campanella, his days are also numbered." They named the three of us as we were over the hill. Well, turned out that day, Jackie played third base, and he made the game-saving or the no-hitter. It turned out to be a no-hitter against the Giants, and the closest hit was a ball Willie Mays hit to Jackie's left, playing third base. And he made a great pickup and turned it into an easy out, and he saved my no-hitter. So that after the game, I got Alvin Dark out for the last out, and it was a no-hitter. Jackie had that clipping in his pocket, his uniform, and sitting on the third base side, right across, was the writer that wrote "You're Over the Hill" last, was sitting about 2 rows back by third base, and Jackie had that clipping in his pocket, and he went over and waved it in his face and said, "How do you like that garbage?" Because he had mentioned Erskine can't win with the garbage he's been throwing. And so Jackie, he was a very intensive player.
Very good. Peter Schaefer, did you have a question?
Oh, I have a great recollection. My very first professional baseball game like George, was at Ebbets Field that very memorable May 12 in 1956. And just to walk through the tunnel and see that bright green grass and having watched the games on WOR, Happy Felton and the Knothole Gang, and see that carom wall with your own eyes in 3D as opposed to watching it on a TV screen that was half the size of today's computer screen. It was really something, and what a memorable introduction to the game of baseball. I don't really have a question. It's so great to hear you talking. It just, my heart is filled with all the memories that baseball has given me over the years. I could not wait for the New York Mets to actually come into existence in 1962, so I didn't have to try to be a New York Yankee fan, having grown up hating them more than I hated anything on the planet Earth.
I know the feeling.
Thank you, Peter. Dave Lippman, you're up.
Okay, I'll try to get this all together. First, as a fellow Navy veteran, I want to thank you, Mr. Erskine, for something you did that was more important than any pitches you threw, and that was serve in the U.S. Navy in time of war. Second, I would like to extend my best wishes to your son, Jimmy. I was just reading The Boys of Summer a few minutes ago, and I know how tough that must have been for you and must continue to be for your whole lives together. I've worked in that issue myself in my journalism career. And my question is what do you think of today's game? Because obviously you're following it closely, particularly today's game.
Yeah, if I caught all that, thank you for one thing for mentioning my son Jimmy. Jimmy's Down syndrome. He's a joy of my life. He's a Special Olympian. He's a good swimmer. He's worked in a restaurant for over 20 years. Jimmy's the love of my life. He's my fourth child, and he's been a bright spirit. So thank you for asking. And Jimmy's healthy. He's now 60, almost 61 years old.
Wow.
Now, back to the, you talk to Jimmy, I got a lot of stories about Jimmy. But he's a Special Olympian.
If you want.
Yeah, okay.
Hold
Now,
on,
sorry, where were we?
1 second.
Barry, tell people to put it on
Son
mute.
was born April 22nd, 2004.
Who's ever talking, please
So
stop.
he's turning
I
17
can't
next
mute
month.
everybody right now.
In 1 second.
I was asking about pitching right now.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think pitching is better than it ever was because they've shortened the strike zone. There's no more called strikes above the belt almost. So the strike zone's smaller, but it did something that surprised me. It made the good pitchers even better because they're more focused than ever on the strike zone. And I think pitching has made the better. I think the strike zone has made the smaller strike zone for the good pitchers even better. So anyway, I admire some of the pitchers today, and even though the strike zone is smaller, I think they pitch better.
Anyone in particular stand out?
Well, of course, Roger Clemens, I watched him through his career. He was a dominant pitcher, hard thrower. I'm not very close to the game anymore. I don't get to any major league games. I see a few on TV, but I'm really not a good spectator. I want to play, but I don't like to watch.
Carl, I believe there's maybe 13 or 14 Brooklyn Dodgers who are still alive. Are you in contact with any of them?
Well, indirectly, I fell and broke my hip back a couple years ago, and I heard from a couple of street guys. Koufax is still living. I heard from Sandy. I heard from Roger Craig, Ed Roebuck, who is now deceased. But yeah, a few of my teammates got in touch with me when they read in the paper that I fell and broke my hip. But I don't get to many games anymore.
Gotcha. Ken Kravitz, are you on this call? Ken Kravitz.
Okay, hi there.
Ken, are you here?
Yeah, right here. Sure.
Willie Weinbaum, you're up. Willie?
Willie, are you the Willie that's been sending me emails forever?
Yes, Carl, how are you?
How you doing?
I'm good, and it was great to hear that Jimmy is doing well.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are about the statue in front of the Brooklyn Cyclones Park for Pee Wee Reese and Jackie Robinson, and the questions people have raised about whether that ever took place in Cincinnati, Reese putting his arm around Jackie's shoulder.
Sure.
Carl, did you hear that question? Carl? Give another minute.
It could be the,
It says.
Could be his time is up. Might be his time is up.
I don't know.
He might have been cut off.
I'll give him one more minute because it says it has not been disconnected. But regardless, that was a fantastic.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
It was 50 minutes.
Oh, I heard you. I'm listening to a
All right, Steve, what do you think?
100. Well, I think, he was on for an hour.
terrific, wonderful.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I will call him in the morning, but
Thank you, Gary. That was awesome.
he was fabulous and remembered everything. I mean, it was just unreal, his memory. So
Unbelievable, unbelievably articulate, really.
fantastic. I will make this a recording and send it out. Thank you. I apologize. It might be, something might have come up. Go on.
He's back.
Gary, thank you so much. This was fabulous.
For whoever is, hi Lincoln, how are you? Next week we have Larry Bear of the Giants. We did not have time to do any preliminary stuff today because I wanted to get Carl on. I didn't know how long he could speak for. So most of you were able to ask your questions. The few who did not, my apologies. Okay.
We'll do it again.
And hopefully we'll do it again. But he was fabulous, and like I said, I will speak to him tomorrow and thank him.
Gary, I had a question.
Really memorable. Thank you.
Thank you,
Gary, a question on the recording.
Yeah.
On the recording, can we forward the recording on to anyone? My neighbor, who's a good friend of his, would like to watch it, I'm sure.
You can do whatever you want with that. Once that's sent to you, it's a free game.
Okay, I can forward it. Okay, thank you.
Larry, could you find out if that ever happened in Cincinnati with Pee Wee Reese putting his arm around? I think it did. There was a children's picture book called Teammates. I'm pretty sure it really happened.
Was Erskine even there when that was supposed to have happened? He didn't pitch with him until 48. That was supposed to.
No, but Erskine was interviewed in the documentary that Pee Wee's son did, and he said that he saw it happen, which is part of why some people say it happened the following year, not in 47 and not in Cincinnati. There's a whole controversy about it.
Oh, just had it a sec.
It has the picture here.
Like Steve might have said, I don't think the phone conversation would necessarily knock him off after time because I have all the time that I need here. You could
I
be
guess
right.
I'm in.
This is the first time we ever did one with.
Oh, I'm not seeing.
Carl was
But we're not in yet.
very nervous about coming on the screen, so that's why we did.
I did. Nothing came up.
So, but for what it was, he was magnificent. So.
Wonderful.
Terrific. Yeah.
Gary, thank
Yeah.
you for the
Very
experience.
good,
Thank
Gary.
you,
Very
Gary.
good.
Gary,
You're very welcome.
You do a
guys
great
can
job.
hang here. I'll be here until the last person leaves. Again, I will call him tomorrow, Hindi, and I will ask him that question.
Okay.
And I will get back to you.
Can we get Willie Mays for May?
Yeah. I don't see the other things on here, like the microphone.
Gary.
Willie Mays.
Maybe it'll come on.
I actually looked into that, and it's not a good thing. So.
Gary, could you also ask him, if you can, about what he thought about Roosevelt Stadium? I asked him, but I guess he didn't answer me. So just if you could ask him that, what he thought of it.
Okay.
Hey, Gary.
Thank you for including me. You
you.
brought many nice memories back. I appreciate it.
All the Dodger fans who showed up tonight, I hope, I try to give a representation of you guys as well to ask questions. So
Did
Thank
fine.
you. Thank you.
Right?
All the
Gary.
Dodger fans, don't come again.
Ed Garrett,
Thank you, Steve.
Gary.
did you see my email to you?
I'm not sure, but
Are you related to the Monticello?
No,
Garrett?
no.
Okay.
I have a question though. You
Sure.
said that there are 11 Brooklyn Dodger people still alive?
I think there's 13.
Wow. Do you know who they are offhand? Quickly, I mean.
That I don't know.
Well, you know what? There's
But
some that came
Joe
later, like
Joe
Jim
Pignatano was
Gentile
another
is
one.
Having
Jim
done
Gentile, Don Demeter, the couple that Gary met. He mentioned Craig, Koufax. There's a
Joe
couple of the guys.
Pignatano is one.
Pignatano is one.
Does
Having
anybody
done-
know
having done a
whether
bunch of
Erskine
Dodger
is the only
fantasy
one
camps,
left from the
he's the
51
only
team?
one left. You know.
From 51?
Erskine is the only one left. And Mays is the only one.
51?
That's correct. Rachel
Erskine and
Robinson
Mays,
was
those are the only
interviewed
two.
several times after the movie 42, actually before the movie 42. And I'm just reading this book that just came out, 42 today. It talks a lot about Robinson, the family, the politics, all that other stuff. She insists several times, 1947, nobody helped us. Maybe that happened in 1948. Erskine didn't come up till 48. So if it did happen, he wouldn't have seen it. But there were a couple of mistakes in the movie. One was that scene. One was something with the bus, and there was a third. I forget what it was. You know what, guys and ladies? 94 years old, sharp as a tack.
That guy is
He gave
sharp.
us the dates of the events. Think about that. May 6th, May 12th. Wouldn't walk Bobby Thompson. Mays is a rookie. You don't walk him to face. I mean, some of the stuff he said was just, really.
No.
And if he pressed the wrong button,
All
or
that
something,
did was hit
he'd
that
be out
one
for an
thing.
hour.
Very impressive. Very impressive.
Well, if you pitched a no-hitter in the major leagues, believe me, you would remember the date also. I would for sure.
He's 94 years old. I understand that. But it wasn't just a no-hitter. He talked about some other stuff too.
Of course. Fantastic.
There was I just wanted.
Yes.
When
Well, I
you
can shut
talk
this.
to him, I have to ask him how the Brooklyn Dodgers stole signs.
It hasn't officially started yet.
I asked him if he knew Josh Prager within a second. Sure, the Wall Street Journal writer. I mean, he's sharp as a tack. He really is. And he bounced back from a broken hip. That's pretty good. Hey, Noel, you were quiet tonight. Didn't hear from Noel.
Well, I'm just, I'm listening.
Writing another book.
If you really want to know, I'm sitting here taking notes because I'm working on
I'm sure
another
you
book.
are.
There were
Carl Erskine Story by Noel Hines.
4 pages of people here. It was very hard to try to navigate this.
You know something, Gary? You got to send this to your buddy at the Post, the video or whatever it is, the audio. This should have been covered by the media. This was a terrific thing.
Chris Haft is the media.
Some of you guys remember the Brooklyn Eagle?
Gary Mintz to the Hall of Fame.
Oh, yeah.
How could you forget the Brooklyn Eagle?
Yeah, it's great.
Roy, how are things?
I just wanted.
Just the memory. Thanks, Ron. This was great. I appreciate it.
Just wanted to say that last week, there was an event that both Giants and Dodger fans would have loved if they got a chance to see it. It's a movie called Big Leaguer with Edward G. Robinson.
where he plays the New York Giants coach during spring training. And it really was a lot of fun. It was made in 1954 and Carl Hubble was in it.
Oh, yes, Carl Hubble, right, number. He
And
was in
Edward
that.
G. Robinson
A really fun movie. It was on, if you get Turner Classic Movies, you can get it on demand.
I
You
got
might
up at
really enjoy it.
4:30 in the morning to watch it. I got up at 4:30 and watched it.
Oh, you
Paul.
did? Yeah. See, I'm
That's
glad I
all
have it
I
on
need,
demand.
man.
I don't have to get up that early. It was a lot of fun. There were a couple of ball players in it. Al Campanis was in it. Richard Jekyll played a pitcher for the Giants who got cut and comes back as a Dodger tryout. That was kind of fun. And the Giants won the game.
Big Leaguer, that's the name of the movie?
Yeah, it's called Big Leaguer, 1954, Edward G. Robinson.
Correction, 1952.
Oh, was it two? I thought well, when I looked it online, it said 54. That's okay.
No,
That's
it
all right.
was 53. Is Magley still living?
No.
Oh, long time ago.
Oh,
I think that's his
He
chat.
died a very bad death. He
Maybe that's what I
suffered
have
from
to hit.
severe depression.
Oh,
He was
no.
in an institution. Yep.
Yeah.
There's a book out about him, written by Judith Testa, Magley, big thick book, kind of like Lee's Branch Rickey book. It's got it all.
Steve, where do you keep all the books that you read?
Don't ask too many questions.
Steve, that
You know,
happened.
the interesting story, and I don't know if he probably knew it, he didn't say it. I mean, they hated Magley, obviously. And there were a lot of fights, especially in 52, 53, when he went into dugout, they kind of beat him up. His fiercest enemy was Ferrillo. When he got to Brooklyn and he walked into the clubhouse, the first person he saw was Ferrillo. And they embraced because they're paisans.
I don't know why, if I wanted to talk.
What's still amazing to me, we all know amazing.
How to get that microphone?
Not yet.
Okay, let me just tell you what happened. I just spoke to him.
I don't chat.
I told him how great everything was. He said he must have got disconnected. So
yeah, he didn't do it.
He was so grateful here, all his fans here, and he really was thanking me up and down. I said, "You ever want to do this again?"
Yes.
He said absolutely. So maybe 6 months down the road, during the World Series, we get him on here since he broke that record and strikeouts at the time. So he had a wonderful time, and I think somebody 94 years old who maybe doesn't talk to many people much, hearing that there are over 90 people in here.
That's a big deal.
He loved it.